opportunity for everyone here. For those at the back, I thought I was going to sing. So we're going to open up for the question and answer session now. And just one admonition here. See, I'm getting a signal from the back. Brian, where's Brian? Brian will have the mic. So when you're going to ask a question or whatever, please ask your question. Try and be concise. Because a lot of people here might want a number of points. And the last time we were here, we sort of overran a wee bit. And we couldn't get all the question and answer people in. So try and be concise as best as you possibly can, so we give a fair shake to everyone in the hall. And also, when you get them, don't ask your question until you get the microphone in front of you. That's to enable the guys on the videotape up there to get it all recorded, so we can use it against you at a later date. Anyway, let me see. Who's going to be first? I'm going to take 2 or 3 speakers at one time, then we'll go through them. If you want to do it that way, Jim, Robin, and Kat, is that okay? This gentleman here, and the guy at the very back, nearest the radiator.
The consensus of the opinion, which I agree with, is that a yes vote will free up the Labour Party in Scotland to return to its socialist roots. My question is, who's going to lead this new Scottish Socialist Labour Party? The present incumbents, the Labour Party politicians, haven't got a socialist hair in their heads and couldn't run a piss up my brewery. They are career politicians committed to a party and not to an ideal. And for too long, been taking the gravy train to Westminster and Holyrood, doing what they're told to do by the likes of Tony Blair and Miliband. No socialism there, just a watered-down conservatism. So where are the new leaders of this new Scottish Socialist Labour Party going to come from? Or will it be a better idea to start a new Scottish Socialist Party?
There you go. Microphone over here.
My question directed to the... My name is Tommy Thomas, I'm from Hamilton. Question's something that's bothered me for quite a lot of years, and some of you spoke earlier about what you heard many, many years back. We have 432 people own land in Scotland. We take no money from it. Why no? And why has it not been prolongated by anybody in power or anybody wanting to get into power? Surely we could do something with that. The land tax that would come for that. That's my question.
Cheers. It's more of a statement I've got here. Sorry? Oh, sorry, John Macaulay. I'm a member of the Socialist Workers' Party. It's more of a statement. The likes of your Amazons are getting likes of £300 million to set up businesses or set up within Scotland. You know, they've opened that place up in Fife. They're also getting subsidised with tax credits. People think the tax credits is there for them. It's no, it's there to subsidise these big businesses. It's to subsidise the Asda's, the Tesco's and the Amazons. And the thing is, tomorrow, I don't know whether anybody's aware of this or not, there starts the community work programme. That sounds a nice wee name, where people are going to be forced to work for 6 months for free, gratis. They'll not get their benefit if they don't do it. 6 months is a long time. What do you think about that? I'll
do them in quickly in reverse order. I You're absolutely right. Tax credits are a subsidy to low-pay employers, and I'm completely with Jim, except for I wouldn't wait 5 years for the living wage. We've got a paper on this one as well. I'm going to keep saying this, I'm sorry, but we've got papers and everything. Our social security paper is not welfare. It's about creating social security again. Let's take the language back. Our social security paper, quickly, there's a basic calculation. If all employers in Scotland were paying a living wage, it would save £250 million a year on tax credits. Now, we recognise that some of the small businesses and some of the marginal businesses would struggle at first, but we can comfortably subsidise them through national insurance reductions or other models. We can move to a living wage straight away, and we absolutely got to, because it's absolutely right. We've got a welfare system, a social security system in this country, which is designed to use anxiety and fear to force people into low pay. It's part of the structure of the low-pay economy. We have a welfare system which is about compelling people into low pay to take jobs that they wouldn't otherwise take because they're rubbish. We have to reverse this completely. Again, if you look at, say, a Nordic country, or what we did post-war in Britain, what we were doing was creating a social security system that was about security. Give people a foundation and then let them build a life for that. So you give them a solid foundation and then they can go and look for good work, not give them a shaky foundation and then force them in any shit that comes along. So that's the first thing. You're absolutely right. We just got to shift that system straight away. I haven't got time to go into the rest of the welfare paper, but have a look at it. On land, we live in a country which is on the borders of the biggest desert in Europe. The north of Scotland's dead. It used to be a thriving, lively community, populated, farmed, lived in, used, worked. There's this massive amount of land up there. And what happened was that landowners stopped using it economically because it was more valuable to trade it speculatively. So in the last 5 years, I can't remember, 5 or 10 years, if you had money, you'd have been better buying an estate in the north of Scotland than shares, because the price of land rose 5 times faster than the stock market. And that's why David Cameron's father-in-law owns 400,000 acres of our land. And Paul Dacre, the editor of the Daily Mail, he owns 40,000 acres of our land. And the one thing that they cannot do with that land is make it productive. Because if they started making it productive, they'd suddenly realise that land wasn't worth what they paid for it. So they've got to keep it unproductive. A land value tax, we've got a paper coming out on this soon, is absolutely crucial. Scotland needs to develop land-based industries again, and we'll never do that unless ordinary people have a fighting chance of owning land. You've got no chance of owning land in this country. You want to build a land-based industry, forget it. You have no chance at all. It's a fundamental part of our industrial policy, both for generating income, but also to bring the value of land back down to its economic use value. And then what we do with it, we can have large-scale biomass, we can have all sorts of local farming, there's all sorts of things we can do. It's crucial that we take our land back. And on labour and leadership, I'm going to say one thing which gets me booed at these meetings, but I mean it. I'm as annoyed at a lot of what's been coming out of Better Together people as anybody else. But we are going to have to find a way to pull this country back together again afterwards. Now, there are people in the labour movement whose behaviour has not been what I would want it to be. But see, once we're through this, we're going to have to find the Mandela Gandhi side of ourselves to say, there we are now, and what was done was wrong. But this is a fresh start in Scotland. We need to build. Now, there's no time to talk about this. There's a whole load of ways that we can make the Commonweal of the Socialist Scotland happen. So we could try and win the SNP, because I reckon 2/3 of the SNP are comfortably Commonweal. I've been doing a lot of meetings. Or we could try and win Labour, because I think about half of them are probably Commonweal. Or we could try and build the Greens up. Or we could try and build cross-party consensus across the different parties, or individual consensus. Or we could start a new political party, although I would warn you that as a political strategist, 18 months is a short time to establish a winning political party. What we have to do is, as soon as this is over, all of us, literally, this is amazing in here tonight. The hundreds of people that I'm seeing night after night at meetings, they've got to get back into politics. We've got to reclaim party politics for ourselves. Pick a party, get into it, and turn it into what you want it to be. It might be Labour and it might well not be, but whatever happens, from the 19th of September, my entire life and the work of the Reid Foundation is going to be all predicated in making sure that this country goes into an election in 2016 where it's got at least one party that could be a government, that stands in a Commonweal manifesto. How that'll happen is too early to say, but that's the goal. We must have a party that comes out and puts on a table a Scotland that we want, because if they do, they'll win.
I think the Labour Party question is really important. I think that that is something that's really interesting and quite important to the debate. I mean, I think that after the referendum, I mean, in the event of a yes vote, we will be challenging 3 centuries of union. That is an explosion in the world of politics. And I don't know what's going to happen to Scottish Labour in that moment, because I'll tell you what, I know a hell of a lot of Labour Party members who are voting yes. I know a hell of a lot of them. And I think that there is going to be some space that opens up there, and whether they do reform into something new, it'll definitely be interesting. I think part of the problem that has plagued politics, and particularly left-wing politics for a long time, is the scandal of funding and the way that parties have funding, and that's what creates that culture of careerism, that people go into it because they see it as a career move and not because they want to represent the interests of their class or their communities. And I think that we need to start looking at ways that we can actually change that. And one of the ideas we've been talking about in the Radical Independence campaign is this thing called the democracy card. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of this before. It's an idea that started in the United States. And basically what happens, well, United States, you know, their political system and how their parties are funded is incredible. Do you know what I mean? Watching it like a bloody circus. Each citizen would get a credit card called the democracy card. And on that card there would be £50. This is our proposal. It'd be £50 on that. And you can give that card, the money on that card, to any political party that you want. But once the party's accepted it, they can't accept funding from any other source apart from more democracy cards. So they can't have it from big business, they can't have it from private interest groups, they can't have it from people looking for a wee bit of a, you know, can you do me a favour here? And I think that's never going to happen under the Westminster system. You know, the parties there are going to continue to be careerist and filled with careerists. But we've got a wee idea that is a way for us to hold our elected officials to account. And I think that would have been great for the Labour Party in Scotland if they could be held to account. I know plenty of people who've been involved in the Labour Party who are disgusted at the Scottish Labour leader saying that we have a something-for-nothing culture. It's abhorrent. The other question that you asked, I think it was yourself up the back, about the community work programme. The attacks on the welfare state are actually, I mean, it's causing people to lose their lives. If you look at what's happened with ATOS, the work capability assessments, things like that. I mean, I think an independent Scotland could be in a position to have a properly funded social security system. And the one thing that we need to remember, and it's something I always try and keep in my mind when I'm out canvassing or talking to people, is that we're fed this line all the time that somehow people on benefits or people that use the social security system are somehow draining the country. And I looked into this, and it's about social benefits that are wrongly claimed, fraudulently or incorrectly, cost the economy about £1 billion. But see, tax avoidance and tax evasion by the super rich, that costs £70 billion. And that's the way our society is structured, because it's actually the super rich that are avoiding tax that we can't afford, not people on low pay or looking for work. And I think that we've got to have some sort of way of changing that. And I think that the proposals that the Commonweal has around welfare, about not using social security to top up low wages, but rather to increase the wage rates, to have a living wage for all citizens, is a far better way forward.
Thanks, Kat.
Let's take the Labour Party first. Scottish politics is going to be turned upside down on the 19th. One of the reasons is that there's people like Kat who are campaigning and learning about politics day after day in this campaign. This is the greatest grassroots movement Scotland has ever seen. And as I go around, I'm saying to those, well, they're young people compared to me, I'm saying to them, you mustn't go home on the 19th. No, you've learned a great deal. You've been inducted into a political process. You've realised that you've got a lot of talent and a lot of ability. Now you start participating in the political process. And nobody knows what the dynamic will be when those people stop campaigning for a yes vote and start campaigning for a better country and policies. I am very, very optimistic about the position in what I call the broad Labour socialist movement after the 18th of September, because it's the left that's going to win this campaign, and you cannot expect that left then to go home, close its mind off. It's not going to happen. Things are going to really change. Now, whether it changes with the Labour Party, I don't know. There is an Independence for Labour campaign, and I've met them and talked to the chap who's leading them, Alan Croghan, and he said he's got two objectives, him and his group. One's to get a yes vote, and the other's to change the Labour Party after immediately getting a yes vote. And I think that's perfectly possible. I rather like the idea that Kat's talking about the citizen determining how much money will go to a political party. You can do it in your income tax return, no bother. You can be a wee bit there that says, £20, £50, and which party you want it to, and she's quite right. Nobody else contributes outside the citizen, and that keeps it absolutely fair. On land, very interesting. There are places in Norway on the same latitude as parts of the Highlands, and they're not desolate at all. They've got thriving communities because the pattern of land ownership is entirely different. Now, the land question has been at the forefront of the socialist movement in Scotland since Adam was a boy. We have no chance of doing anything about it until we get a socialist government in Edinburgh. But once we get a socialist government in Edinburgh, then we can start to tackle the land ownership issue. You know that the Duke of Buccleuch doesn't own the Buccleuch estates. It's done through all sorts of complicated ways. The Queen doesn't own Balmoral either, incidentally. That's done through trustees and all. You strip that out so that we actually know who the beneficiaries are of those who claim to be the landowners, and then we start to... And one of the things we can start to sort it out is the land value tax. Right now, there are millions of acres of land where nobody pays a penny towards the local community. We can start with that, with a land value tax. As far as tax credits go, I can never get my head round that tax credits were a subsidy to the worker. They're a subsidy to the employer, and as long as there's tax credits, we will have a low-wage economy, because there is no incentive whatsoever on an employer to invest and go up the value chain and pay higher wages while he can get the state, in fact, to pay. As far as the work programme is concerned, this is folk who are subjects of the state, because we don't have full employment, and that means that the working class person is not in a bargaining position. If you have full employment, then the bargaining strength lies with the ordinary worker, because then the employers and everybody else has to pay you, because there's not another 10 folk or 40 folk or 50 folk willing to do the job. Right now, you can be told if you don't like it, there are plenty of other people doing so. Can I say one word further on benefits? On the television debate with George Galloway, I was asked by one of the interviewers, it was put to me, that my claim of Scottish values as different from south of the border was false, because on the question of benefit cuts, the opinion polls north and south of the border didn't show much of a difference. Well, if that's the case, we've got to rake our conscience on that. Of course, we've got chancers in the benefit system. We've always had chancers in the benefit system. But they're a tiny, tiny minority. The vast people who rely on benefits, whether they're unemployed or whether they're disabled, are decent people who are victims of the way we organise our society at the present time. And so I had no hesitation on that television
and saying the Scottish nation has to rake its conscience? Has the milk of human kindness that we boast about that flowed through the veins of the Scottish body politic, has it turned sour? I don't believe it has, but I think you've got to take head on when somebody says cut benefits, to tell them what you're doing is making people destitute and punishing children. Now face up to that.
Brian, this lady first, the guy at the back, and the fella here. You first. Brian, this lady first. Oh, sorry. And the fella at the back.
Dallas Carter. I've got 2 points. One quite brief question. What is your opinion on staying in the European Union? Because I gather the thinking at the moment is that we stay in, no referendum, nothing, we're all going to be part of the European Union. Second one, they're talking about tax credits and how employers should be relying on them. I can tell you an awful lot of people claiming them are actually single mothers working 16, 18 hours a week, and that's what they choose to do, so they can work and have time with their kids, and they claim tax credits. Can you really expect an employer to pay someone like that a full-time wage? I think you're probably going to have some kind of system to allow them to carry on as they are, because they don't want to work full-time, they don't want to put their kids into nursery for 10 hours a day. They like the system as it is. Part-time, a subsidy, and time with their kids.
Thank you. My name is Jim Main. I think one of the problems so far in the campaign is how the media and the politicians present the issue. You're either for the SNP or you're for Labour. As a socialist, regularly self-socialist worker, I think there's a radical socialist case for independence, and I think that's been outlined tonight. You can be against Trident, against austerity, and against the Tory toffs who are wanting to privatise the health service. But a couple of questions I want to ask. Jim talked about the latent power of the working class. We've seen it recently, the last 12 months, in the anti-bedroom tax campaign, which won a very, very important victory against the bedroom tax, and it's really energised communities, particularly in this area where the North Lanarkshire Council were exposed rather badly. So the question I've got, I suppose, is twofold. One is, how do we take that energy we saw in that campaign? How do we sort of bring it into the independence campaign? How do we get the two forces together? And I suppose what's part of that is, how do we get the many, many Labour voters who are so far undecided or maybe thinking of voting no, how do we get them to come over to a yes position?
Hi, Andrew Galloway. I'm forever hearing, and none more so the other night when you were talking to George Galloway, he was of the opinion that a no vote is in essence of us deserting the fellow workers in Ipswich, Manchester, for instance. He then went on to say he had more in common with a working man from England than he does with a rich Scottish landowner. But surely if the good people of England want to vote Tory, then that's their democratic right. We can be a beacon of hope for our brothers in the rump UK to follow suit. There is a massive democratic deficit regarding things. I mean, the Scottish MPs voted against the bedroom tax, we got it imposed and such, but voting no, as they say, we don't want to be living in a socialist Scotland. There's also a centre-right people who I'm speaking to. How do I convince these people of the centre-right on the political spectrum for a yes vote?
I don't know how to address the centre-right, frankly, because for me, the referendum is about the possibility and the probability and the certainty of liberating the Scottish working class. I mean, that's what I'm about. I don't deny the legitimacy of the ideas of the centre-right. And, you know, I oppose them, I don't agree with them, but I accept that that's a legitimate point of view in a democracy, fine, and they will have their position in Scottish society. I don't claim that everybody on the left has all the answers to everything, and I've found as I've gone through life, it's worthwhile listening to the other side as well, because you can always learn a thing or two. But I make no appeal whatsoever to the centre-right, and I'd be telling a lie if I did. On the question of our fellow workers, you know, Scotland once had 50 Labour MPs, while Margaret Thatcher was destroying our manufacturing base. We have, time after time after time, done our bit in the argument about workers united north and south of the border politically. And we've got nothing in return since the 1945 government, basically. I mean, I put it this way. Suppose two folk are standing on the Titanic as it's going down. One can jump and get saved, and for a whole variety of reasons, the other one can't jump. And the one that can't jump says to the one that can jump, I don't want you to jump, I want you to drown along with me. Well, I would jump. On the question of things like the bedroom tax and the poll tax, I'll tell you something. I am fed up us having to engage our energies in fighting policies that we don't like and having to fight them, to defeat them. How much better when we're independent, when we don't need to do that, when we can use all our energies to actually build policies that we like and nobody imposes upon us. That's for me one of the essence of the reason for voting for independence. One of the problems we have, and I think it has to be addressed, the Labour voter who's still undecided is probably undecided because they don't like Alex Salmond and the SNP. And you'll notice that the Better Together No side concentrate massively on Alex Salmond and the SNP. George Galloway never debated independence with me. George Galloway belaboured Alex Salmond, the SNP, and their white paper. I debated with Neil Findlay, who is a Labour MSP, in Kilmarnock, and he was exactly the same. And I said, but one day you're going to argue about independence. No, no, no. It was Alex Salmond, Alex Salmond. It was a trade union meeting, and he was appealing to their basic anti-SNP attitude. And we have to get over to people. This is not about Alex. This is a national question. This is about the future of our grandchildren and their grandchildren and what we do with our society. As I put it, Alec is mortal, but the nation's immortal. And there's, I mean, I don't know what they would do the morning if Alex Salmond got knocked out with that proverbial bus. They would have nothing to argue about. Now, that's not an idea that I could get expelled for the SNP for just saying it. But we have to get that across. This is about something much, much bigger than any individual and any political party. And if we can get that across, once you get that out of the way, then you can start talking to Labour voters about the kind of society that we actually want to create. Now, I don't agree with the lady when she says that a part-time worker should get a different wage from a full-time worker. If I put in 1 hour of work, I'm entitled to the same wage as somebody else putting in 1 hour of work. That's not an argument that I would accept. On the European Union, actually, I would prefer us to be in the European Free Trade Association. The only thing that matters to an independent Scotland, the only thing that matters to us is access to that European market, which includes England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. That's the only thing that matters. And if you're a member of the European Free Trade Association, you have automatic entry, because there's been a treaty between EFTA and the EU since 1994.
and it's created the European Economic Area. Sometimes as you go through passport control, coming back from a foreign holiday, you'll see EEA. Well, that's the European Economic Area between EFTA and the EU, where there is, in fact, no barriers to trade whatsoever. But that would free us from lots of other things in the EU. We would not be totally controlled by the European Union. We would not be dragged into a potential conflict with Ukraine at the present time. We would be able to control our own fisheries. We would be able to control our own foreign policy, and we'd be able to control our own foreign trade policy with the rest of the world. Norway has been talking to India about a free trade agreement. Now, for a big country like India, Norway presents no problem for a free trade agreement because there's no vested interest there. But for an EU-India free trade agreement, that's much more difficult because there's vested interest somewhere in the 28 countries in the EU. So we would be far better off in terms of the sovereignty that we could exercise if we were in the European Free Trade Association. But let me say this. I don't believe for a moment that we'll be kicked out of the European Union. I think it's absurd for anybody to believe that. First of all, they claim that we are citizens. They tell us we are citizens. Secondly, they go around the world preaching democracy. Change peacefully by the ballot box in a democratic method. Well, we're peaceful. Nobody's going to stop us going to the ballot box and all the rest. Just think of their international reputation. If we vote yes democratically and peacefully by the ballot box, and they tell the rest of the world, well, what we've been telling you actually doesn't apply to citizens in our country. Now, they might then say that they'll have an argument about the terms in which we stay in. That might be a much more difficult position, but the oil factor is not unimportant. We are the only major oil producer in the EU, and that's a bargaining chip that we can use.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry, I don't want to speak for too long. I want the chance for people to ask as many questions as possible or make as many contributions. I do worry about the idea that this has become, as I said, a debate between Labour and the SNP, because it can't be about that. At the end of the day, it can't be about Labour's failed and, oh, I don't like Alex Salmond, because what's in the white paper is actually really interesting. I think there's some good proposals in it. I don't think it's perfect, but it's not what the debate's about. It's about much more than that. When I was speaking to Jim earlier, he was saying that there's about 250 different groups across Scotland that have sprung up outside of the official Yes campaign who are out campaigning for independence. Like 250 normal grassroots activists going out, chapping doors, making the arguments. So that's, I think, the way to win round the Labour voters, is to say, well, it's not a debate about mainstream parties. It's not a debate just between Labour and the SNP. There's much more going on here. On Europe as well, I mean, I think there is a problem with democracy in the European Union. Like, I do think there are problems with it. I've been to Athens, to Greece, to speak to trade unionists there, and some of the austerity measures that people in Greece are suffering are brutal, really, really brutal. So I do think there's a problem with democracy in the European Union. But I'm the same as Jim. I don't think we'll be kicked out. I think there might be arguments about how we're going to stay, and I think that we can shape the terms on which we are in the European Union. I think we can actually shape those terms. It's not the first time it would have happened. When the French were negotiating their constitution within Europe, they renegotiated it because they weren't happy with it, and it was the socialist parties and the broad left that made sure that the renegotiation happened and that they softened the constitutional arrangement. So it is possible for that to happen. On your point, the man down here, about the debate between George Galloway. I mean, some of the arguments that come from Galloway on this, I just find really, really irritating. They really, really annoy me. Because for me, like I was saying, I'm involved in the trade union movement, and what brings us together? Like, as a class is our shared interests, our shared history, a shared identity. It's not what country we live in. That's not what defines us. And I don't have any less solidarity or any less support for someone striking in Greece or in France than I do someone in England for independent. That's not how it works for me. And anyway, a couple of years ago, there was a European general strike. Workers can show solidarity across borders. Of course they can. Part of the problem for me is that the very laws which are criminalising solidarity, the anti-trade union laws, they have never been repealed. Even when Labour was in power, they were never repealed. Tony Blair celebrated the fact that we have very, very restrictive labour laws. And, you know, that's another opportunity in an independent Scotland, is that we demand the repealing of those anti-democracy laws, because that's at the heart really what they are. And at the end of the day, borders aren't drawn on these islands between like Glasgow and Birmingham. That's not where the borders are drawn. Borders are drawn between ordinary citizens and the super rich in the City of London. That's where the borders are drawn. They're drawn on class lines, not on national lines. And that's what people like Galloway keep forgetting.
And also super quick, first of all, on the part-time working, again, I haven't got time to explain it all, but I'd encourage you to go and look at our paper on social security. We're proposing a citizen's income, which means that, because I'm assuming what you're saying is people should be able to take fewer hours, not lower pay per hour, because they've got other caring responsibilities. We've got to find a way to resolve that, and citizen's income is the way to do it. If you have a citizen's income which everybody gets a small payment sufficient to live, out of their, you know, no matter what their position is, and then after that, employment's all top-up pay on top of that for everybody. It works quite well, but you need to go and have a look at the report. There's not time to talk about it. The EU, I'll say slightly in defence, the current issue of the Scottish Left Review is online, and it's fascinating. There's been a big debate about this. My view is that the EU right now is almost exactly equally a device that prevents a race to the bottom on social protection, which makes it socially democratic, and at the same time, it prevents a race to the top on trade issues, which makes it neoliberal. And it's almost perfectly on the border. So yes, it stops countries chasing each other to the bottom and longer working hours and poorer regulation, and that's a good thing. But then we've got the trade deals, which is a bad thing. Now, in my view, at the moment, the EU is just marginally better than worse. If they pass the TTIP rules, that would tip the balance another way for me. And again, it's difficult to go into this all just now, but at the moment, I just think the EU is slightly more beneficial than bad, but it is a bit borderline for me. Okay, what do we do with Labour voters? I've never been a fan of parties. I tried them. It didn't really fit me. They keep wanting you to think everything they think. I'm a big fan of ideas. So how do we get the Labour voter to come over? Let's stop them talking about Alex Salmond and let's start them talking about ideas. And what we're going to try and do is produce what is, to all intents and purposes, a manifesto for a better Scotland, which is not coming from any political party, but it's coming from a whole host of social thinkers. We're going to try and put that on the table in early May, take that to Labour voters and say, you don't have to like any one party, look at what Scotland could be. So I hope that helps. The working class energy and the power thing, I'm going to say something which is a little complicated here, and it's also about the centre-right, which is, if you look at what has actually, one of the things which I am going to say here is, the left is quite good at rhetoric about workers' power and fight and struggle. The reality is, when we have the workers struggling on their own, they lose. Where the workers have benefited, where working people have benefited throughout the 20th century, throughout the period of the democratic era, is when we manage to make their interests the same as the interests of other people, so that these institutions are supported. So you look at the single thing that's probably done more to help working people in this country, and it's the NHS. And the reason it's so strong is because it's collective. Everybody from centre-right to centre-left, from wealthy to not wealthy, has a vested interest in making it work. Now, that's why we used it very, very carefully, used the phrase, all of us first. What our strategy is, what we are trying to do, is to say the more that we can make everybody's interests come together on things which work for everybody, the people who benefit the most are the poor. That's why universal public services are so important. Everybody benefits, but the poor benefit by far the most, and it makes them stronger and more stable. So what we're trying to say is small businesses have been screwed over by the UK economic system almost as much as many of the poor and many of the workers in this country. So if we can see that an economy which benefits small businesses to create good jobs and creates good jobs for workers and enables strong public services, we can tie these interests together. And I've talked to centre-right groups, and they don't agree with everything. But they'll talk about a lot of common you say, actually, yeah, why is it that a small business pays a higher rate of tax than a corporation? Because a corporation doesn't pay any tax. So if we're talking about independent business, they have a lot of the interest, and we can bring people together. Because the politics of division, which I hate more than anything, the politics of division, which is the politics of the UK, the people who always lose are the poor. And that's why we're trying to in this policy stuff to keep people together. But on the solidarity point, and we've got to be able to tell the difference between a solidarity and a suicide pact. Staying with England doesn't help the poor in England. It certainly damages the poor in this country. It's a suicide pact to stay. It's not solidarity. And I'll tell you a really interesting thing. By far, the coolest thing about this campaign for me is they've invited me to go and play Glastonbury. Now, I know that's surprising, isn't it? Billy Bragg is curating the left field tent at Glastonbury, which is the politics tent. I am in touch with so many lefties in London, from the academic front, from the policy front, from the activist front. They phone quite often and say, what's going on in Scotland, what's going on in Scotland? None of them want us to stay. The people who keep saying, oh, stay and look after the workers in England, don't seem to be the people who are actually out campaigning for the workers in England. What they're telling us, the people who are actually out campaigning for working people in England, what they're telling us, run Scotland, run and bring help. That is not the same as what I'm hearing from the Labour Party and others who are saying, oh no, you better stay and suffer it a little bit because somehow in a way that I can't quite explain it's going to help the poor. It won't.
Well done. We're going to run out of time shortly, but I'm going to have three speakers. I'm going to take one over there, one here in the middle, and one over here. And I want the balance. There's a wee bit imbalance here in relation to women, gender, the very word I was going to use. And I don't want to use the other word. So this lady here, and somebody from over here, who'd a hand up over there wanted to speak. A gentleman with a white T-shirt over there, and somebody over here. What? I'm pointing up there. I'm pointing up there. I'm not pointing up there, Tommy. That gentleman at the very back row there. That'll be the three. If you're good, quick and concise, you might sneak another couple in. That says indulgent arm tonight. Anyway, these guys might have to go home. Sorry.
Right. My name's Sharon Anderson. I'm a mum and a grandmum and a Yes campaigner and Motherwell and Wisher. I want to start with a quote. They are entitled to live in a society that is different from the one where so many are mired in poverty. If boldness is required to give us priority, well, I'm being bold. That's for Jim Silver's book. The missing million and the boys that are born to fail, well, that's our families. Welcome to Motherwell. But here's the thing: our kids are not looking back anymore. They're looking forward. They don't want to know why we need to get independence. They want to know how to get into these jobs like the oil industry and the energy industries that we're hearing so much about. So can any of the panel members get us information that we need to get our kids ready to create our own workforce? Some of our kids are still at high school. We can utilise what's already in place. We're not want to let this opportunity pass us by for another generation. With your wealth of knowledge and the kids' determination, we can start to take control of our own futures. Oh, and I'm in your band, Jim.
Hi, my name's Callum. I'm a law student at Strathclyde University. The discussion thus far has vastly been about the social and economic state in this country, and rightly so. Obviously we must escape the clutches of the banks, the corporations and the puppet politicians whom they control. However, my question is on drug reform in this country and what the panel thinks, what potential there is for that, considering that prohibition at the minute hasn't worked. There are many people in this country who are addicted to drugs and taking them. and that puts all the wealth of drugs in the hands of criminals. What potential is there for progressive ideas such as those in Uruguay, Colorado, Washington, etc.? Thank you.
Hello, Frank Conley here. I'm asking what the Labour Party or what the Labour MPs have done in Lanarkshire for the last 30 years. The old socialists like Jimmy Dempsey and John Smith must be turning in their grave when we see has been represented in our constituency by Pamela Nash, and you've got Frankie Roy who sat here a few months ago and basically treated the audience with contempt with some of his answers. Also look at the European question. And the Spanish can't lecture us about anything. When I went to Spain in the early 70s, it was a fascist country run by Franco. And it joined the European Union after us. And if they do take away European membership from Scotland, they must remember this. They've denuded our fishing rights over the last 20, 30 years. And then they can answer when we put a 200-mile exclusion zone in the Spanish trawlers, and therefore they can't fish in our waters. And it's funny how East Germany was admitted in the European Union when it unified with West Germany in 1990 without any questions being asked. Thank you.
I'm going to be really fast so that we can get more questions in. Yourself, sir, the point about drug reform. At the end of that contribution, I think you almost answered the question yourself. You said, what is the potential for progressive ideas in an independent Scotland? And I think on this panel, we're all talking about progressive ideas. Like I said, Radical Independence isn't a political party, but I'm sure the majority of people in that would agree that people should never, ever be criminalised for an addiction. People should never be criminalised for that level of addiction. On the question about education and young people, I think look to the Finnish model in Finland. They've got much better rates of social mobility, of social participation, of youth employment, of having a skilled workforce. And I'll tell you what they did. They abolished private education. They banned private schools. That's how they did it. We've got some of the worst rates of working class kids going to university. We've got hardly any apprenticeships, no skilled apprenticeships, no productive industries to put people into. And I think that balancing out the education system at the very start of it is really, really important. Because what happens when you've got an education system that says you can get a better deal if you've got more money? What does that do to people from a very early age? And I think we should, and maybe that is a radical proposal, but I say ban private schools.
The first thing that I'd say to your Waynes is I can't lie to you. There's nothing that I could tell them that would get them in good jobs that don't exist. That's the problem. I told you 1 in 5 jobs in this country pays between £25,000 and £35,000, and we know who monopolises those jobs. There's only one thing that we can do is create more industries, and fast. Now the key thing here is, one thing I do want to say is, this isn't a generational thing. Clever politicians, which is all politicians, clever politicians stroke their chin, they always talk about why things take time. What I'm going to say is, Attlee created the welfare state, the NHS, a massive house building programme, and nationalised large chunks of the industry in 5 years. Thatcher undid it all in 5 years. Politicians or political parties or nations with the will to do things can turn it around fast. We're going to put out a paper soon on 21 industry sectors that Scotland could develop, and some of them could be day 2 of independence. We can get house building, not the old house building, modern high-tech house building like the Germans do. We could get that started in day 1. We could get energy technology installation on day 2, and then we can start doing things like saying, what about biomass, what about land-based industries, what about a whole host of manufacturing building industries that we could do fast. That's the only way that I could look at, a Wayne from a working class background in the eye and say, I can see a decent future for you, is the truth. I'm just going to say one thing. Just imagine this: drugs, prison reform, immigration, the whole squad. Just imagine what it'll be like when we don't have the Daily Mail. That's the problem. The politicians are all scared of common sense if the Daily Mail decides it's no common sense. I don't even know if they'll keep publishing, but we can certainly make sure they don't have the same market share. And then we can have a real serious shot at addressing the drugs thing. You picked the right point, it's the profitability. Take the profit out of it. That's the problem. We've got to deprofitise the illegal drug industry in this country. Who are these MPs in the Labour Party? Well, I mean, who knows? Where did they come from? But the same is true of the SNP. Politics has become a closed game. You become a politician by working for a politician. That's how politics works now. We are the most, there's so much I've not been able to talk about tonight because there's so much going on. We are the most centralised country in the developed world, below the least democratic country in the world, below national level. We've got a local authority in this country that's the size of Belgium. How the hell is that local? I live in Lanarkshire. I'm 35 miles to my local authority, and folk in Hamilton send folk out to knock schools down in my town, which nobody in my town wants to knock down. We don't know who the hell they are. They want to put car parks in places they've never seen. There's no local democracy, but it's got another crucial problem. In France, in every election, 1 in 78 members of the public stands for election. In Scotland, it's 1 in 2,000. Politics is a thing that's done by people you don't know in places you don't see. Every other country's got decent local democracy, and that offers a platform because, one, it helps women get into politics, because the current model doesn't help women get in. Without local politics, women find it much harder to get into politics. And even more so, working class people find it hard to get into politics. We hear a lot about there's no women in politics, and that's true. There are no working class people coming through and getting into politics. So we have to create a political system which enables people to start locally and build up the knowledge and the skills to become national politicians. And as for Spain, we'll be out of the EU. I mean, if rules had anything to do with anything, Germany and France would have been thrown out of the EU years ago for breaking the deficit pact, and America would have been thrown out of the World Trade Organization for subsidizing its internal farming market. The world doesn't work in rules. The world works in realpolitik. We will be outside the EU for as long as Spain can afford its fragile fishing industry not to have access to our waters. It will be out the EU for as long as we can afford to put every single EU citizen in this country on EasyJet and send them back to their countries where they won't have jobs, which they've got here. The Spanish are all here working. There's 40,000 Spaniards in Edinburgh. That won't happen. As soon as they don't need the entire northwestern territorial waters of the European Union in European Union control, you know, we'll just say to them, well, we'll make a pact with Russia then. How do you feel about that? They can help us patrol your northern borders. That's not going to happen. And if that doesn't work, I say, let's offer Spain our 9% of Gibraltar back.
You just missed the question.
In my rush to speak really fast, I forgot to actually say something, and it was on the drugs question again. So when you think about the amount of social problems that are caused by alcohol, and that's not criminalised, it's because it's profitable. And I think that that's actually right at the core of the drugs question, is about the profitability of the industry and the constant criminalisation of the working class. That's really what it's about. Because if you think about all the times there's been a scandal about a Tory minister and some drugs, and it's all been a bit like, oh, well, you know, they get away with it. But when it's ordinary people that it happens to, it's a massive criminal issue. And I think that question, that's why I wanted to come back in, actually highlights a lot of the class division that we have in this country. And I just wanted, sorry, I rushed through my first contribution. I just wanted to come in and say that.
Okay.
As long as there is prohibition on the Class A drugs, we'll have criminality. It's as simple as that. It was no different in the United States when prohibition was on alcoholism. But there's another layer of drugs which is an extremely difficult one to deal with, and that's the legal highs, which I'm told by chemists, you know, if you ban one lot, they can manufacture another lot the next day. It will be very difficult producing legislation that deals with that particular issue. But, pardon? Yeah, I understand that. And so, the root cause is the prohibition. It will take a great deal of moral courage on the part of politicians to deal with that, let me tell you. And I don't think the present people who are MPs and MSPs would have the necessary moral courage to do so. I must tell you that being the case. As far as offering something to our young people, there can be no jobs without jobs, real jobs. And for real jobs, you need projects. You need things. Look, there's a lot of work required to be done in our country. I live in Edinburgh, and you pass by some of these very, very nice, tenements. But you see when you enter the closes, they're in a terrible state. And if you actually think about it, the number of jobs potential that would be created by just simply solving that wee problem of bad closes. There is a lot of stonework in the whole of Scotland which requires stonemason skills to tackle. And so therefore we can create work, because we don't create the work, we can create the people to do the work because the work is there crying out to be done. And that's something that we actually have to grasp. Labour MPs, the best job in the United Kingdom is being a Scottish Labour MP, because outside of their own constituencies, nobody kens them and nobody kens what they're doing. A very great deal of the work that would normally be associated with a Westminster MP is actually done by the MSPs at Holyrood. And they don't get any coverage in the press, which means that you actually don't get any spotlight on them in the press either. Not necessarily their fault that they don't get coverage, but that is in fact, a fact of life. As far as the EU is concerned, if the EU want us to remain in, they will find a way of keeping us in. If you look at the history of the European Union, there was a thing called the Luxembourg Accord, which young people in here will never have heard of. When the European, or what was called the common market, was established, it was on the basis that everybody had to agree with every policy. The French didn't like the policy, so they had the policy of the empty chair. So you took a vote, they weren't there, you couldn't get unanimity. And what they then did, they met in Luxembourg and said, look, we'll agree. If there's something that somebody doesn't really like, it'll no pass. And that was the Luxembourg Accord. You've even had devices, for example, where treaty obligations have required an answer by midnight on a certain day, and what they did was they said, no, we've stopped the clock. It's only 1 minute to midnight until we solve this, even if it takes us 3 months. So they're perfectly capable of being flexible when they're presented with a very difficult problem. So I say I don't have any anxiety about that whatsoever. But again, once again, I'd tell you, I'd far rather be in the European Free Trade Association along with Norway and Switzerland and Iceland and Liechtenstein. And by the way, when you hear the stuff about Iceland having been a basket case, Iceland's recovered faster than the United Kingdom, and its folk are better off than we are.
Well, look, and I'm really pushing against time, and as a trade unionist, I don't want to keep people working late in here tonight that are committed for something else. I don't mean yourselves, I mean the staff and so on. And we could go on for a good time. But I just want to give all the panellists an opportunity, maybe stay on for a couple of minutes each, on a kind of line and winding up position as to where we think we should be before we come to some very, very important announcements, which will take 5 minutes, because we're involved in a campaign here. Our biggest campaign is we set up here tonight, first time ever, been given a vote on the 18th of September to decide the future of our country. So I'm going to ask you, okay, sorry about that, we'll have to get everybody in. Can you do it this time? Maybe do it the next time. Maybe do it in alphabetical order and we'll start a lot of meetings. But anyway, I'm going to get Kat to go first, couple of minutes. Kat, same yourself, Robin.
I just want to finish by re-emphasising the point that we're not going to have a massive majority. We just need to tip it over the edge. So go out from this meeting and speak to as many people as possible and take the arguments that Robin and Jim have given tonight and give them to other people, because really, naturally, and when the debate is had, yes always wins. When I've been setting up local meetings, local independence meetings, I always try and make it a debate, always. It's dead hard to get someone from the no side to come along. It really is, honestly. And that's the thing, like, we need to be going out and talking to people on the streets and convincing them, because at the end of the day, on the 18th of September, we need to get the yes vote and we need to get the turnout. And on that ballot paper, we've got the choice of 2 futures. That's it. It's just 2 futures that are on that paper. And one keeps and preserves the British state in its current form with all of those inequalities that we've talked about and all of that stitched up economic model that only benefits the rich. And the other option challenges those 3 centuries of union and opens up countless possibilities for the people of Scotland. And I think we should be going out and taking that message to people. You've got a choice. And at the end of one of them is a whole other Scotland.
And I'll be super short, partly because there's been a lot of talk tonight, but largely because I'm dying for a pee. This is the best and most exciting country in Europe to be in right now by miles. It's alive. The painting, the singing, the writing, the thinking, the talking, the meeting, everything. I look at it, I mean, I get up in the morning and my missus just forwards me Facebook things. It's like, my God, how many paintings can people do in one day? How many poems can they write? This is an amazing country to be in, and it's so exciting. It's so, I did 18, I'm just off the back of 18 public meetings in 4 weeks, and every one of them I go out knackered, and every one of them I come home excited and enlivened. This is an amazing place to be. I was watching the Spirit of 45, the Ken Loach film, and I got a wee burst of the sense of plagiarism when I looked at it, what they did and what we were trying to do with Commonweal. And then I thought, it doesn't matter, because if we can make it work again, it's worth it. And I would be lying if I said anything other than that a wee tear comes to my eye when I watch that stuff and when I see what happened in 1945 and how we turned people's lives around. And that Spirit of 45 was something else, but it ain't going to be a patch on the Spirit of 15 once we win this.
One of the lessons the working class can learn from the 45-51 Attlee government was that the working class set the priorities. I'm all in favour of going along with somebody else. But, you know, if you look at the history of the NHS, yes, everybody's in favour of the NHS now. That wasn't the case in 1945 to 1948. And Aaron Bevan had to use all the audacity of his socialist ideology to get the NHS through. And the support came massively from the working class people. And the reason I'm trying to talk to the working class about their talent and their power and what they can do is that for the first time, when we're the majority in Scotland, we can set the priorities and other people have got to debate round our priorities, not us having to debate around the priorities that they impose upon us. That's the important thing. One of the great benefits that is arising from this campaign, and that's the reason why the yes vote is going up, is that we are day by day destroying the myth that's held us captive of our own inadequacy. When they told us generation after generation, you're too poor, you're too wee, you've got to hand big cousin England your hand to keep you, Janie Buchan actually argued at one time that we had to stay in the Union because it kept us civilised. What they have sown generation after generation is the idea that something no quite right about us and that we're inadequate to run our own country. That myth is being destroyed by us day by day by day. And that's one of the triumphs of this campaign. But go out and tell your neighbours and your workmates and everybody you can talk to. Because this is a matter of moving from meetings like this with information that you have now that you might not have had before you came. But the most important point, the most important information to convey to other people is that the referendum is about power. Absolute raw power. We either keep it or we give it away. And we're going to give it away. You might not like Alex Salmond. Do you like Cameron and Clegg better?
I don't want something to happen to that carpet. But anyway, it's my privilege now to say one or two things about the speakers to thank them. Robin, in his absence. Kat, of course, and Jim, and just to say to Margot, if she's still watching, that angry grandpa wasn't bad tonight. And I speak to grandpa myself, Jim. I've got 12 and you've only got 10. Anyway. I'd like to thank Independence Live, and in particular Kevin Gibney, for giving this opportunity to hopefully a number of people that can't make it here tonight to get, it's a great thing to do, this live streaming. I'd like to thank David Cherry and his team for the video. We'll get that up as soon as possible, and on David's hands on that one. And I want to thank the Glow Centre, and in particular manager Ian and Jan Goodall, who helped to get it going tonight, and the staff who are working as we speak. I want to thank all the Yes groups who advertised the meeting, and John Adamson and his group here in Motherwell and Wishaw. Thanks to all the men and women in Yes Motherwell and Wishaw, and the Waynes, with whom we've been working, distributing papers, leaflets, etc. John, Claire, Mary, Sharon, Anne, Daniel, Andrew, George, Mary, Alan, Ben, Jamie, John, and all the rest of them. There's a blog site been set up. Stuart Darling, who you referred to earlier, Jim, your contribution, in fact, he's sitting there. You've got a wee blog site set up. Get yourselves some comments in there. http:// for Indy, WordPress. You'll see it in the Facebook. And also in conclusion, I'm asking for the following. Lend your support. That's what Robin, Kat and Jim and everybody else are saying, people out in the streets every day of the week. Sometimes hearing nonsense and sometimes hearing a bit more than nonsense. But that's where we are. So get in your support. Get involved. Door-to-door canvassing is starting. Training is going to be taking place. Kat and her group have been in Drum Chapel and Easter House in big numbers, knocking doors and talking to people face to face. Watch the Yes Motherwell Wishaw Facebook for the details of that. There's paper distribution to be done. Every little helps. In relation to doing your own street, your own closer, your own multi-storey block or whatever. Speak to your relatives and friends and workmates, as Jim has said, and give us your name and your details as you leave in relation to if you can help. The Lanarkshire Forum for Independence is working on further events. The next one projected is a meeting for women. Again, open to decided or undecided. In fact, I'll just be told the date tonight. It's going to be in here on the 2nd of May. So we'll get the details and all the rest of it on that one. Watch the local press and so on. Some talented members of our group, Dominic Millionaire, my eldest boy, Phil Macaulay, Paul Carr, have written and produced a song entitled Independent Land. And it can be captured. Look out on the Facebook for it. We were hoping to get some CDs ready for the night, but I'll probably be ready tomorrow. Just to not to make any money off them, but to get the message out. A tidy wee song, tidy tune, and it's going to be your signature tune in the Lanarkshire Forum for Independence. And lastly, for the first time in the meetings we've been doing, we're going to ask you to donate what you can, only if you can. And there'll be a couple of buckets at the back door. So give what you can, only if you can. And just lastly, or second lastly. Can you let the audience know, it says here, there are declaration forms at the table at the back where John Adamson is standing. This is lastly. Remember the words in the song Independent Land when you hear it. There's a wee line there that says, turn our whispers into roars. Turn our whispers into roars. And that's the challenge between now and the 18th September. And when the 19th September, let's get the biggest roar of them all when that result comes in. And then we can set about the argument and the policies that will bring our country forward and bring prosperity to every single person here, the Waynes and Grand Waynes, and we can all retire like me and Jim away at the road, knowing the job's done, and they'll be looked after. So good luck, and thanks for coming, and we'll see you again.